This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Next on the 5 o'clock report.
The usual stores that are open at 7 a.m. were not open.
We are marking the 446th day of our loved ones suffering in Hamas tunnels.
Kitchen tools made from recycled electronic waste can leach toxic chemicals into your food.
I do know the Heimlich, but I've never done it.
Now, let's go to the newsroom.
Good afternoon and welcome to the broadcast. I'm Family Life News anchor Sarah Harnish. The post-Christmas travel rush is on. 119 million of us are on the roads now through New Year's Day. It could set a record, and weather may have an impact for some.
Severe storm risk in Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas could affect 13 million people with hail, damaging wind, and isolated tornadoes. Some of Houston has already been dealing with street flooding. Out west, another atmospheric river is impacting the region with rain, high winds, and more mountain snow.
Rain is in the forecast for us Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday with highs above average, upper 40s to mid 50s in New York and Pennsylvania. We've got your full forecast coming up in a few minutes. It's unusual, but stores are pretty quiet today. That's ironic because it was a good Christmas for businesses financially this year. MasterCard says overall sales are up almost 4%.
It really seems like people spent online versus in stores.
So much of those sales weren't in brick and mortar buildings. They were on Amazon or online stores. Reporter Jeremy Rosh is stationed at the mall and at a quiet Walmart in Boston. He says typical long return lines in stores aren't so long today.
It's not that nobody's here, but it's far from the everyman for himself vibe of yesteryear.
I was already at a plaza, and the usual stores that are open at 7 a.m. were not open.
Barbara came back to Macy's to return a pair of slippers that just weren't quite right. I also ran into JJ. This time of year is like the Super Bowl for market researchers like himself. He says online retail has a lot to do with the lacking crowd.
If you want to touch and see the product or firsthand, real time, that's why you come out and do something in person.
The man accused of attempting to assassinate President-elect Donald Trump at his golf course last September will not be tried until late next year. Ryan Ruth's attorney said they need more time to mount an insanity defense. Legal analyst Jessica Levinson.
An insanity defense is very hard to mount. We should remember that it includes not just the defendant showing a significant mental defect, but also that the defendant didn't understand that what he was doing was wrong. And there's a lot of evidence to undercut that here.
Ruth has pleaded not guilty. Israel's military struck multiple targets in Yemen's capital today, including the Sana'a airport, just as the head of the World Health Organization was boarding an aircraft. He was not injured. At the same time, there were protests in New York City over the hostages still being held by the Hamas terror organization in underground tunnels in Gaza. It's not known how many of the hostages taken in October of 2023 are still alive. One of their cousins spoke today at a news conference.
Unfortunately, we are marking the 446th day of our loved ones having been suffering in Hamas tunnels. This is unacceptable. It has to stop today.
New Yorker Ruby Chen's 19-year-old son is one of the American citizens held in Gaza.
And yesterday was indeed a very difficult day for myself and my family, where we sat around our dinner table and we had an empty chair.
Investigators are on the scene trying to determine what caused the crash of an Azerbaijan jet that killed 38 people in western Kazakhstan.
Search teams have recovered critical components of the aircraft, including the black boxes, which are expected to provide more answers in the coming days.
Earlier reports said the plane was hit by birds, but new reports say something else.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says the crash is under investigation and it's wrong to draw conclusions now. The Wall Street Journal is reporting the passenger jet headed for Russia was likely hit by Russian anti-aircraft fire. It had diverted over an area where Moscow's air defenses have battled Ukrainian drones. Cell phone footage shows it making a sharp descent before crashing.
That plane was hundreds of miles from its scheduled route. Now that the big cooking holidays are over, it is time for a kitchen cleanup. up, Bree Tennis explains what you need to toss.
The Environmental Protection Agency says growing research shows some black plastic kitchen tools are made from recycled electronic waste. When heated, those can leach toxic chemicals into your food. They say toss that drawer full of black plastic spoons, spatulas, ladles, tongs, and containers and start off 2025 toxic-free in the kitchen. As for replacements, they say look for tools made from wood, stainless steel, or silicone. I'm Bree Tennis.
And most of us spent Christmas Day grazing and opening gifts. But in Utica, New York, the rescue mission served a free lunch to those in need, many of whom had nowhere else to go. Executive Director Wendy Getz tells Spectrum News.
We work with adults who have had really challenging lives. They have mental illness and addiction and other issues going on. And sometimes we're able to provide them with literally a small gift or a meal, and they haven't had anyone take care of them in a long, long time.
Volunteer Cora Hawk helped dish out meals and hope.
That's why I work at the mission, so I want to do something that makes a difference in individuals' lives.
She was one of dozens of volunteers serving over 1,000 people at the Utica Rescue Mission on Christmas Day. Still to come on the 5 o'clock report, what were the top faith battles in 2024? Our own Greg Gillespie breaks it down in the courtroom and across the country next for Faith Under Fire's Year in Review. You won't want to miss it. After weather with Kevin Williams.
Well, variable amounts of cloud cover tonight. It'll be a chilly night. Low temps, mid-teens to low 20s. Then on Friday, partly sunny skies, seasonable and reasonable. High temps, 30s and low 40s. Milder air arrives over the weekend. The approach of a disturbance will ultimately bring us some rain. That rain could begin as a little icy mix in some areas, especially along the I-81 corridor, but temperatures rise steadily Saturday into the 40s across most of the area.
Thank you, Kevin. Today, the Faith Under Fire podcast from Family Life News is a rewind of some of 2024's biggest issues in faith versus culture battles. As we approach the end of the year, our own Greg Gillespie samples some of the interviews that we've aired in the past 12 months. Let's listen in.
One issue that we've come to again and again throughout the year is the question of gender identity and gender transitions and how that affects women's sports and girls' locker rooms and restrooms. A local angle from the president of Houghton University, an NCAA sports school that's dealing with regulations brought about by their athletic competitions while also holding to traditional conservative Christian values.
We're a Christ-centered institution. We assign students to residence halls and participation in any sex-segregated activities based on their biological sex. Students at Houghton University compete on athletics teams based on their biological sex. That is not changing. That, however, does not cover what it looks like in collegiate competition. We have decided we're going to advocate for change in NCAA policy. As far as young women on our campus, they do have the ability to opt out of competition, competing against biological males.
One of the privileges we have with Family Life News is to talk with experts who give some perspectives on how to enhance your life individually and as a household. Jared Lopes is the organizer of a group called Dad Tired. That sure sounds like it's a play on word of the phrase dead tired.
That's one of the most good unintentional things that I've probably ever done is titling it Dad Tired. That was a total accident. I actually was going through a really rough season in my own life and marriage. My wife and I were on the brink of divorce. There was this season where I was really detached as a husband and a dad. And my wife, I didn't know this, but we were in the middle of a fight and she paused and she had tears in her eyes and she said, "Jared, I just want you to know that I've been waking up at 2 a.m. every morning and I've been going into the living room and I've been getting on my face and I've been begging God to capture your heart again." It reminded me of the verse in Romans that says it's his kindness that leads us to repentance. And it was the kindness of my wife. It was the kindness of God through my wife that really, for the first time in a long time, led me to repentance, to soften my heart and to come back to him. Guys who have healed souls. And those guys are the ones who have a group of brothers around them who they're confessing sin often to. They're praying with each other. They're being the kind of brothers that know everything about them and love them fully.
Is that camaraderie something that seems to be missing more often than not?
Most men would not say that they are lonely. And yet in my conversations with men, even if they're not using the words, what they're actually describing is loneliness. Brother, you cannot do this alone. And that does not mean you're weak. What you need is to admit your brokenness, come find other brothers, and do this thing together.
One of the issues we covered was a local Christian university that closed its doors. The issue of campuses closing is not unique to that one place, but is a part of what's happening in Christian and secular schools. Christian journalist Warren Smith at Ministry Watch.
Well, what happened in your neck of the woods, Greg, with Clark Summit is unfortunately kind of the trend. In general, there are simply fewer college-aged students. A lot of folks are moving to online. There's been some question about the value of a college education, especially when you consider the spiraling costs. The ones that are succeeding seem to be really focusing their programs, and they're also focusing in areas that might be considered non-traditional for Christian schools. A lot of creativity, I think, is going to be necessary. I think one of the things that I think the Christian community at large is going to have to face is they're going to have to ask the question, do we really want Christian higher education? Is it important to the church? But I think the evangelical church has to answer that question in a broader way. We're going to have to support Bible-believing evangelical colleges so that we can get the tuition costs down to a level that makes sense for middle-class families. Otherwise, we're just going to see this trend continue.
And one last stop on our tour of 2024 interviews, some encouraging news for Christian churches. I interviewed Allison Norton of the Hartford Institute, finding some bounce back in worship attendance, volunteer participation, and finances. Are we fully recovered? Are we mostly recovered? Are we partly recovered? What is your research telling us?
What we see is really a mixed message. And I think the largest takeaway from our study is that the landscape is unsettled and churches continue to respond to new questions that emerge about how to do virtual worship, how to create a sense of commitment and community among virtual only attenders who may feel more like spectators than committed, involved participants. And other churches that people are tired of this process of change and innovation and just want to go back to the way that things were.
I'm Greg Gillespie, Family Life News.
Those are some of the top stories this year for Faith Under Fire. You can always hear, share, and download these interviews on our news podcast page at familylife.org. Just click on Faith Under Fire. Time next for tonight's market report brought to you by Faithward Advisors. Wall Street is closing with stocks higher. This comes after the market was closed yesterday for Christmas Day. It's also known as the Santa Claus Rally, which takes place during the last 5 trading days of the year and the first 2 of the new year. At the closing bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 28 points to 43,325. The S&P 500 fell by 2 points to 60,37, and the Nasdaq dropped by 10 points to 2020. Faithward Advisors is a Christian financial planning firm online at faithwardadvisors.com.
Hi, I'm Rob West with today's Faith and Finance Minute and the story of the gift of the Magi. Matthew's Gospel tells us that after Jesus was born, wise men or Magi came in search of the one who had been born King of the Jews. Why did they come? Well, they came to worship him, to acknowledge that this newborn king was worthy of praise and honor. And how did they worship? Well, the scriptures say they fell down before him, a sign of humility. And then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts. In a sense, the wise men not only gave Jesus gifts, but they gave us a great gift. They set an example of how we can worship the Lord, first by seeking him, then by being humble before him, and finally, by opening our treasures and giving. Connect with a certified Kingdom advisor who's been trained to deliver financial advice that aligns with your Christian values by visiting our website, faithfi.com.
Coming up on the 5 o'clock report, it pays to have 2 parents that are in food service. The story of an 8-year-old that saved a life. Next.
We have a cold night coming up tonight, but more moderate temperatures as we head toward the weekend. With a milder air coming in this week and the next system to bring precipitation will bring rain. The focus of the rain will be on Sunday. In the meantime, we'll have intervals of clouds and starlight and low temperatures mid-teens to low 20s. Tomorrow, partly to mostly sunny, and high temps in the mid-30s to the mid-40s. Saturday, cloudy with a bit of rain Saturday. Could begin as an icy mix along the I-81 corridor. High temperatures Saturday, 40s and low 50s, and some rain and showers mild on Sunday.
Thank you, Kevin. Finally, at 5, an 8-year-old is being hailed as a true hero after coming to the aid of a choking classmate during lunch. Thomas Conley was sitting next to a classmate when a grape got lodged in his airway. Before teachers could even rush to his aid, young Thomas stepped in and proved to be a lifesaver.
What I was thinking was to push on his stomach, and that would push air up. And I do know the Heimlich, but I've just never done it. You should never be afraid to help people.
The Mesa, Arizona second grader's mom says Thomas is quick thinking. His parents also both work in the food service industry, so he's gotten an early education in food and kitchen safety, which paid off in a big way for his lunch mate. His school held an assembly to present him with an award. Says Thomas, I've probably never had this much attention in my life. And that's the world that we live in for Thursday, the 26th of December, the day after Christmas. I'm Sarah Harnish, and this is the 5 o'clock report on Family Life.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.